Hey, just a quick heads up, this is my, review of the DLC, so this is your official spoiler warning. Do not go ahead if you do not want to be spoiled on the entirety of the DLC, because I'm talking about all my feelings on it, so you've been warned. Other than that, enjoy. Take it away past me. Alright, what's good y'all? Soul here, and welcome back to my story mode. So it's been about a week at this point, and I'm sure like me, most of you by now have most likely finished, or at least played most of, the DLC for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. However though, on the off chance that there are a few of you that haven't finished the DLC yet, or want to play it and just haven't had access yet, and you don't want any spoilers, I'm giving you a warning right now, because I am going to be talking about all of my feelings and thoughts regarding the entirety of the DLC in this video. I did put out the entirety of my personal experience with the DLC, so if that's something that you're interested in, if you don't want to purchase the DLC, maybe you just want to watch it from somebody else's experience, that is my previous video, so, if you want to go check that out. I am throwing in a shameless plug right now. But other than that, why don't we go ahead and start focusing a little more on the topic at hand. In one of my previous videos, I made it very clear that I wasn't really all that excited for Part 1. I was actually more so looking forward to Part 2 of the DLC. Not that it necessarily looked terrible or anything like that, but there was nothing really drawing me in for it, you know what I mean? Come to find out, I am far from one of the only people that felt this way. Well before the DLC even dropped, I was witnessing a lot of different mixed signals and stuff like that over social media, and just from people I know that played Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Either they were kind of on the fence about getting the DLC, or they had no idea that the DLC was dropping as soon as it was. Hell, even some dedicated PokeTubers that I've been following forever forgot that the DLC was dropping on the 13th, despite all of their recent trailers making it super clear how soon it was releasing. So it's not necessarily that I'm shocked or anything like that, but it is really interesting how divisive this fanbase is. It's truly incredible. But at the end of the day, I really couldn't blame them because, as I just said a moment ago, I wasn't really thinking all that hard about it either. And you know what? I'm gonna be completely honest here. If it wasn't for the fact that I was a PokeTuber, I'm not even sure I would get the DLC this early. Frankly, I got it because I had to keep reminding myself, am I really gonna miss out on this opportunity for content when it's just sitting there right in front of me? Am I really just gonna pass that up? And so here I am, DLC beaten. It's been a couple of days since I've even touched it, and now I'm talking about it. And so now we have to sit here and ask ourselves, for those of us that have beaten it, was the DLC good? Was it worth the playthrough? Was I too hopeful for the quality and amount that they gave us? Or was it just enough hopefulness to not overexert my excitement? Why don't we sit down together and go ahead and ponder this question? You guys already know the drill by now. We're going to talk about the goods, the bads, and our overall thoughts. So naturally, we're going to go ahead and start with the good. And I will say, easily the best part of this DLC is absolutely its story. It's nothing absolutely insane, or not even something that we haven't seen in the Pokemon universe before. However, I can appreciate a good story. We have a tale of mistreatment when following the story of Ogerpon. A story in which, again, I really didn't think that I would be all that invested in, but you know what? They did a good job with this one. They did a really good job of making you feel bad for Ogerpon. The moment it set foot in that village, it was completely mistreated, and ever since then, its life has gone nothing but downhill. She was ostracized for her looks, and her friend were banished into the mountains for God knows how long. A group of greedy and frankly awful Pokemon killed her friend and took the only thing that made their lives bearable. And when she went back out to defend herself and her friend's honor, she was completely ostracized by the village. I'm really glad that we were able to get justice for Ogerpon because my goodness, this thing has grown on me so much. When I initially saw Ogerpon in the promotional art for the DLC, I thought really nothing of it because frankly, I already knew that Terrapagos had much more to do with the overarching story of Scarlet and Violet, so I just overall was not interested in this story. But if anything, that kind of plays into the story in its own way, don't you think? A little ironic. Much like the villagers, I myself didn't care about Ogerpon like that. I dismissed it as absolutely nothing because that wasn't my problem. But once I met Ogerpon for myself and got to know her as a Pokemon a little bit, yeah, no, it was time to get that run back. They did a good job with this one, and I could very much appreciate how they went about it. You can definitely tell that post Sword and Shield, they really had to get in their bag in that writer's room. They were not playing no more games. But moving along from that, another thing that I could definitely appreciate is the characters this time around. Not that it's a huge cast or anything like that, but the small cast that we did get, I rock with it. And frankly, it's bigger than the last cast that we had in part 1 of Sword and Shield's DLC, but we'll talk about that another day. The first person that we meet in this DLC is in fact Miss Briar. She does not play a role in this DLC whatsoever besides just getting us, the player character, to the land of Kitakami. And yet, I still took an interest in her character because they did a good job of setting her up for a lot more than we probably initially thought. I'll say this much about her. She's either going to play a huge role in part 2, or an even bigger role in what's most likely going to be the next game that we receive. I have a theory on this, but that's also a discussion for another day. Focusing more on the actual DLC itself, the characters that we actually spend the most time with are the siblings Carmine and Kieran. Design-wise, they were already looking quite stellar, but getting to know them, they actually weren't at all what I expected. And I say that mostly referring to their development. For example, when we first met Carmine in the trailers, I was expecting her to be this cold, kind of reserved, really not with the nonsense type beat, you know what I'm saying? But it turns out that she is the nonsense. She's very dramatic about battles, she's always making threats, she's a whole ass tsundere. Like, I did not expect that at all. However, when she gets thrust into a situation with you in which you both have to assist Ogerpon fix her mask and get it back to her so she can get back to her life, yeah, no, she starts to warm up to you a lot. By the time that we have our final battle against her right before she has to go back to Blueberry Academy, she's applauding us for winning the battle, something she never would have done when we first met. Originally, she didn't like the idea of us being there because she didn't like the thought of her hometown being used as a site for tourists. And I totally get that. If the home that I grew up in became the equivalent of a freaking museum, I'd be pretty pissed about it too. I wouldn't want people going through that. It's for that very reason that getting to know Ogerpon really changed her view on things. She ironically found it unacceptable that the village ostracized her and banished her up to the mountains because of how she looked and how she was treated. Getting to know Ogerpon really helped her understand that treating people like that is really unfair, especially when you don't know anything about them. Traveling with us helped her learn and realize that we're not bad people. She just had to get to know us a little bit. When it boils down to it, the lesson here is that it's okay to be cautious of people, but ostracizing them before you even got to know them is not so good. You know what I mean? So all in all, I enjoyed her character and I really enjoyed her arc. Can't wait to see her in part 2. Her younger brother Kieran is also somebody I'm looking forward to seeing in part 2, but for a completely different reason. By the end of this DLC, he developed in a completely different way than his sister, and that caught me completely off guard. When we first meet him, he's super shy and super reserved. We also learn very quickly that he's kind of a unique little guy because he is the only one out of every single one of the villagers that was more interested in the ogre than literally anything that they had to say regarding the Loyal Three. He actually didn't like the fact that the ogre was all alone and really felt bad for it before anybody else did. Once he was aware that we were hiding something from him, he started to backpedal a lot. He grew irritated, impatient, and very frustrated with us for lying to him. Which is valid, of course, nobody likes to be lied to, but it's very much surprising coming from his character. Every battle after that point was with the intention of proving who was more worthy of protecting Ogerpon. And of course, after every battle, he grew more frustrated because he realized that there was a huge gap between the two of us. He definitely did his part and tried to help in other ways, like making sure that the villagers apologized to Ogerpon for how they treated her, but at the end of the day, Ogerpon still wanted to come with me as opposed to Kieran, and that took him over the edge. The last we see of him, he is racking his brain on how to beat my ass next time he sees me, and then we get the to be continued. That was crazy. I gotta say, after all of that, Kieran is now one of my top reasons as to why I'm more excited for part 2. Cause man, that is a crazy arc. I also appreciate that because of his character giving us a to be continued type situation, that means that the people that we're gonna be fighting and dealing with in part 2 of the DLC, they're gonna be strong. They gotta be. Anyway, aside from all that, one of the last things that I think I should probably mention is the Blood Moon Beast side quest. This also kind of plays into characters as well because I really do like Perrine as a character. She's got a personality type that I want to see around the Pokemon universe a little more often, so I'm really looking forward to if she does have a place in part 2 of the DLC. But other than that, I'm so glad that she got her entire section, an entire side quest dedicated to her that was just an entire nod to Pokemon Legends. She's like the great-granddaughter of Adaman. Her partner Pokemon is a Hisuian Growlithe. Everything that you do with her revolves around music from Pokemon Legends, and the Blood Moon Beast is literally an ancient Ursaluna that took on its own unique form because of how long it's been around. On top of that, I also really enjoyed the mini-game involved with finding the Blood Moon Beast, taking pictures of all the Pokemon in their natural habitat. That was fun, it was soothing. I would totally be down to have an entire like mini-game situation in which you could come back and keep doing stuff like that. And Perrine is awesome. She's a great partner to work alongside with, and she has her own little developmental arc in which her love for photography really grows when she understands why she came to love it in the first place. And of course, that only happens because of yours truly. But overall, awesome character, can't wait to see more of her. There better be more of her, I swear to Shanks. So that just about does it for all of like the general goods and stuff like that. So obviously we're flipping the coin and we have to talk about some of the negatives when it comes to my personal experience with this DLC. The first and most obvious elephant in the room is, yet again, the performance. I mean, I'm sure all of us had an inkling, right? That this DLC was most likely going to perform at least just as bad as the main game. And yet somehow it manages to perform even worse. The annoying part is it's mostly just frame rate issues, at least in my personal experience. There was just so many areas constantly where the game just could not run it because there was too much happening. The game was not optimized. The DLC had zero time to even keep up with any form of optimization they tried to put in, and it just, it's very frustrating to play at certain points, truly. And even with all the time they had, they could not help but still manage to make the land of Kitakami look muddy as hell. There's just no saving any graphical anything in this game, honestly. There's a point in time where you have to traverse through a lot of like mountainy area and rocks and stuff like that, and everything just looks so gross, muddy, it barely functions, it barely holds together. There's an entire area that runs like garbage. Like, it truly is just like a miserable time in a lot of portions during this DLC. One of the most miserable portions, easily in my personal opinion, is the Ogre Oustin minigame. Not only does the game perform possibly at its worst during this minigame is not fun, it is not worth doing, but unfortunately you have to do it at least one time to get through the story. You run around on your little Pokebike and you're smacking into balloons for like all of 3 minutes or something like that, and just filling up boxes. What is fun about that? Like, we're not even jumping through hoops or anything like that. We're not doing anything even remotely interesting. And if that is a thing that you do later on in like harder modes or something like that, you probably should have started with the fun mechanics at the beginning when we are forced to play through it for the sake of the story. Don't you think? I don't know what the rest of the rewards look like, but an experience booster is kind of busted. I guess an item like that is nice for like a brand new playthrough, but I've beaten this game like 3 times already. I'm good on that. This game does not need to get any easier than it already is. Another thing that kind of low-key annoyed me about this is the Pokédex this time around. They only added, actually, like 100 Pokemon, but half of that Pokédex is Pokemon that you've already caught from Paldea, so it's like, what's the point? Why are we acting like we don't have over 1,000 Pokemon? That's what you guys said in your words, so maybe act on that a little bit. You guys could have a little room for a little more Pokemon. Granted, I know that we're getting all this in like part 2, but I don't know when part 2 is, and we don't even have a guarantee that we're gonna get more than 50 Pokemon, if that. I don't know, just having like a brand new Pokédex dedicated to an entirely different area with Pokemon that we've already caught seems like kind of a waste of time to me. Feel free to absolutely not agree with me on that one, that is your call, but that's just a me thing. Now, one thing I will say before my final gripe here is I am happy that they added some kind of side quests at all. Side quests, just like the ones that we have here, are absolutely something that the main game needed a lot more of. Have I talked about this yet? Regarding how crucial it is that they didn't have side quests in the main game. If that's not something we talked about yet, we can absolutely have that conversation. But regardless of all of that, I am very pleased that they gave us any kind of side quests in this DLC at all. With all of that being said, I have to ask, why are they so easily missable? The only actual side quest that's like in your face like it should be in the right place at the right time is Perine's side quest to go capture the Blood Moon Beast. But there are other side quests present that I had absolutely no idea about until well after my playthrough of the DLC, midway through editing. Midway through this recording, as a matter of fact, I went and did one of those very side quests. This one was pretty interesting because there was a lot of actually kind of challenging battles and a lot of good rewards to get out of it. So I went ahead and did that and then finished everything in about under an hour. Only to find out there's another entirely different side quest that you can do, but I'm good because that one just nets you money. I don't really need any more money in that game. But my thing is, how did y'all even find these? Because frankly, I was taking my time. Believe it or not, I really was taking my time going around catching Pokemon. I wouldn't be able to do the Blood Moon side quest if I didn't do that. And yet, I still missed it. Don't know how that happened. Now, I saved that one as my last gripe only because that is probably mostly just a me thing. Obviously, other people managed to find those just fine. I just don't trust Pokemon to give me actual side quests, so I didn't really bother talking to many people, because talking to people in Pokemon games don't really prove all that fruitful sometimes, you know what I mean? But that just about wraps it up for all of my likes and all of my gripes. So, we have one final question. Is this DLC worth it? If I had to give you a straight answer, I'd probably tell you, not right now. I mean, sure, if you really want it right now and you just need to know if it's a good time, go for it. I had a good time with it despite all of its issues. However, if you're truly and seriously on the fence about getting it, I just say wait at least until part 2 comes out to really make that decision. The DLC, all of it, is half the price of the full game. I think that it's well more than fair to just go ahead and wait till part 2 is actually available so you can just play all of it in like 1 or 2 sittings. But other than that, yeah, no, I'd probably just say hold off. It sucks because it could have been worse, but it really could have been a whole lot better. In one of my previous videos, I was talking about the possibility of just delaying the DLC a little bit. I'm sure that a lot of you guys, like myself, had an instant gut feeling once this DLC was announced that what happened was exactly what was gonna happen. Obvious unpolished and obvious rushing was almost the damn near downfall of this DLC. The main game is already barely held together by popsicle sticks, so slam dunking a whole bucket of content on top of that, not the move. They definitely could have taken a much better route with this, and there's a prime example out there that I feel that they absolutely could have gone with. This is probably a very weird thing to mention, and I'm sure that a lot of you are probably going to disagree with me on this, but hear me out anyway. I know for a fact that I've mentioned it at least one time before, but do you guys remember Cyberpunk 2077? For those of you that don't know, long story short, that game was one of the most anticipated games of all time for a long time until its release back a couple years ago. And when it did release, it came out to not so stellar reviews, mostly because of its function. Now, I was one of the few people that had no idea what the game was supposed to be, what it was supposed to look like. I knew absolutely nothing about it going in, and I had a stellar time. Through all the glitches and rough patches that I experienced with that game, I found a heart of gold. I could see what they wanted, I could absolutely see the vision, and even then, the story was already muy caliente. One day, they decided to drop an anime that took place in the universe of Cyberpunk. After everybody and their mamas watched it, they decided to hop back on the game and, oh, would you look at that? Now it's good all of a sudden. They had spent about 2 years updating the hell out of that game, and then once everybody came back to it, it was very much playable and a lot of fun. Literally about a week or so from today, we are getting a whole ass DLC for it 2 years after initial release, and it looks really good. It looks super polished, it looks like it changes the way you can play the game, it looks like it has a stellar story, and I'm really looking forward to that. So, did anybody by chance catch the comparison I was making? If not, I totally get it. Let me explain. On release, it was broken. However, instead of taking the Cyberpunk route and actually fixing up the game a little bit, they decided to bum rush themselves right into a DLC that's also broken and by extent barely worth it to a lot of people. Literally under 1 year was simply not enough time to cook up a proper DLC. Not if it operates like this. But I guess it is what it is, because at the end of the day, they're not listening to me. They're listening to their wallets. And their wallets are saying they need to bum rush part 2 of this DLC as well if they want to keep that money nice and warm. So I guess we'll see what happens with part 2. I am terrified. But hey, you know me, I'm just being a little dramatic. Overall, I'd have to say that the DLC, it's a pretty good time. And also probably has the potential to be an even better time if you were to play it with a fresh account. That way you have access to all of these other different Pokemon and these power-ups on a brand new adventure throughout all of Paldea. So I don't know, maybe we'll have to see. Maybe that Shinx solo run is looking a little more interesting. But we'll probably talk about that another time. So, for now, I'm gonna need you to do me a favor. You ever seen Chalk Zone before? Okay, great. Turn around, reach into that chalkboard and just grab that little drawing of the mic that I made. Yeah, no, just grab it. Yeah, you got the mic. Excellent. So, turn that on and tell me everything that you guys are thinking in regards to the DLC for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Did you like part 1? Did you hate part 1? Do you think that it had a lot to offer? Do you think that it had practically nothing to offer? Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I'm always down there with you guys. But with that, it do be time for me to skedaddle. I would like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm Gonzo. Thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time.